Hello, this is Björn from Step Up for Children's Rights. Welcome to our channel again. And I'm delighted to have a guest from Norway. Again, I'm here with Marius Reikeras. And Marius, you are a human rights counsel, and you've been fighting in this area with these child welfare cases for a long time. But how did you first get involved in all of this? This is maybe a question that many of us who follow you on Facebook, on social media would like to know. How did you first get involved in this?
Well, that's a good question because before 2010, I was not aware. I wasn't involved in child welfare cases at all. I was doing. I had some big cases going on with the deep sea divers fighting the Norwegian government, the Scandinavian Star case, which involved 159 people who died in this horrible ferry tragedy. But in 2010, for some reasons, I can't even remember the reason why, I was invited by some demonstrators who were outside the Norwegian parliament, and they wanted me to make a speech about human rights and child welfare. But I was, as I told you, I wasn't very much into child welfare cases at that time, and I met with like maybe 30, 40 people who were there. And to be honest with you, of course, I said to myself that there must be something wrong with these people, since the government has taken their children away from them. So that was my initial reaction, like most people, I think. But then I said to myself that I've seen a lot of human rights violations going on in the other sectors of the law. So I should take a closer look into these cases, at least to see if the judgment or decisions involve human rights issues. So I decided to look into a number of cases, especially from the county board, which is the lowest courts we have in Norway, which is more of a board. And I quickly realized that in all of these cases, the human rights articles weren't mentioned at all. And that kind of like woke up the curiosity in me, because I've seen a lot of the same aspects into different aspects of the law. And obviously, when the human rights articles are being ignored, you don't necessarily know about the state, what's accurate facts, because of course both sides of the story have different opinions about what's the correct statement of the facts. When the people who are ruling upon these cases are not involving the human rights articles, you know that these people are being deprived of fundamental human rights, no matter what you say, because there is an obligation for Norwegian judges to comply with the international standards, and that's an impossibility when these cases are being ruled upon without even taking into consideration what the human rights acts are. So that's basically how this started. So and time flies. So this is like 10 years ago. This was actually, as we're speaking, I remember the date. It was exactly June 18th, 2010, that demonstration was. So that's 10 years today.
Yeah, exactly. 10 years ago. It's interesting. And then how long did it take you to realize that this is actually a serious problem in your country when you first saw that it's not just a handful of cases, but that there are lots of cases that we're talking about?
Yeah, some people approached me at that demonstration saying that there is no possibility to get justice in Norway. Can you please help us to bring awareness? And I said, after looking into some of these cases, that yes, let's try to bring some of these cases to the European Court of Human Rights. And that I started with in the fall of 2010. And I remember from working on these cases from 2010 until 2015, it was impossible to persuade the judges in the European Court that something was wrong in Norway. Impossible. No matter how good you thought the case was, the court would not accept to look into it. I mean, why should they look into cases in this country, this champion of human rights, when you are dealing with atrocities in Turkey or Ukraine or Russia or whatever? So when you were competing with big countries like that, and you have a government, and credit to the Norwegian government for fooling the international society about the situation. It took approximately 4.5 years before we finally started to convince the European Court of Human Rights that something was wrong. And it started with the Lubben case. That's what happened. I met through the Lubben in the fall of 2012. She was a young and very charismatic person who have not only lost her child into public care, her child was adopted. They had acknowledged forced adoption. And of course, she was, like so many others, in a desperate situation. And on 15 October 2012, the case was dismissed in the Supreme Court, and she asked me, "Can you please help me?" And for some reasons, I don't know why, but I told myself at that time, and it's quite interesting, that this is the case. This is gonna be it. I don't know why, but I just had the gut feeling. So we started and of course I thought that this is gonna be the key case. You have to put a lot of resources into this. And I remember I spent so much time digging into the papers. And I realized that this is crimes against humanity. That's what was initial feeling, because this is a normal mother, this is a normal family. There is no violence, there is no drug abuse, nothing. Just a young mother who at that time maybe needed some help, which is natural when you were a young mother. But she had the strong family in her to help her as well. So,
and that was her first child, or
this was her first child, born in 2008. It's a day in 25th of September 2008. And that child was taken into public care when the child was 3 weeks old. And a few years later, the Norwegian authorities, so the Norwegian judiciary, accepted to grant the foster family forced adoption.
And they have also never, as far as I understood, never really had a plan of action how to actually reunite with her child.
Yeah. And that's the interesting part, because I remember reading the Drammen City Court, which was the main focus in the Grand Chamber, because the Drammen City Court made its ruling in the fall of in February 2012, sorry. And it's actually stated in that judgment that no matter how good mom through the Lubben is at that time, she's never going to get her son back. It's stated in the judgment. Mm. So that trial was more like the result was already given. It's stated in the judgment, saying that, I mean, no matter how good you are, she was a mom at that time as well. She got her second child. But it didn't help her, because the city court had already decided upon the ruling, saying that she will never get her son back, and we will grant access to forced adoption and deprival of parental responsibility. And this case was for some reasons, this was just the feeling I had that this is going to be it. And we filed a complaint in, I think it was April 2013 or March 2000, within the 6 months limit. And finally, we had the breakthrough, in my opinion, in 2015. When that case was communicated to the government of Norway. That was the first of these 40 cases. And of course, that was a tremendous relief to see that finally, after so many years working on these cases, the European Court had finally started to take this seriously. And so we were optimistic, of course, because we considered this case to be like the key case already then. And we were hoping, of course, for positive outcome in the chamber. And the chamber gave, because at the same time as this case was pending before the court, the international society started to take interest in what was going on in Norway. I remember in 2015 a lot of things were going on, but I met with Thomas Szykovsky at that time in Norway. That was her first meeting in 2015. I met
Thomas is a European member of the parliament from Czech Republic.
Yeah, and I remember I was very impressed with his commitment to engage himself in cases going on in Norway. And I, of course, at that time too, he was a powerful politician. And the ball started rolling. So you had the Laban case, you had the attention from the European Parliament, and you also had the attention from other countries, not least Lithuania, Poland, and also the European, the Council of Europe started to take part and interest in this. And of course, when we reached 2016, I think we had a tremendous sort of like revolution when the Bunari case happened. And of course, no matter how tragic that case was for the Bunario, that case released a sort of like a revolution throughout the world. I mean, hundreds of thousands of people. I mean, I was invited to Vienna in April 2000 and I wanted to go, but I remember that we had these demonstrations all over the world, and personally I was in Washington DC in December 2016 meeting thousands of people there. And this was sort of like a start of like this movement against my own country, which was highly needed because I knew that atrocities were going on there. But now, for the first time, we had attention on this. And then you had the representatives from Romania coming to Norway, where these representatives from the government, from the Council of Europe, were so disappointed with the meetings with Norwegian representatives that they went back to the Council of Europe saying that we cannot accept this. So we have to dig further into it because this is not only about the Bunari, this is like a structural problem. So that started the initial progress leading to this resolution that came in June 2018, where the European Council, led by this Valerio Gallecci, said that there is a dysfunctional system going on in Norway and we have to take this seriously. And of course, when the European Council, as well as many parliamentarian leaders around in Europe, are saying the same things, of course, the European Court of Human Rights take notice in this, because this is, the European Court is, of course, is a legal body, but it has also a lot of political signals to it.
And we're talking about nearly 40 cases that were brought to the attention of the European Court of Human Rights.
At the moment, yeah.
But what is the way in order to actually get your case, if you're a parent, to the European Court? I think you cannot just, if you're a parent, if you have a child taken, just go to the European Court. What are the steps, or when are you actually entitled to have the right to take your case to the European Court?
I remember, if we go 2 years back in time, Norway there was approximately 10 or 11 cases communicated to Norway. And I remember one of the most respected human rights counselors in Norway, Gro Tune, who was a member of the European Commission for more than 20 years. She stated in the newspaper at that time that this is a catastrophe for Norway having 10 child welfare cases in the European Court. Then, of course, the year later, then we had the Grand Chamber hearing in the Laban case in October 2018, and the ruling was made in. Then, of course, we had the first conviction in September 2018, and everything was like rolling, and then we had the conviction in the Grand Chamber last September, and another 5 convictions following that. And the reason why I think the European Court because if 10 cases is a tragedy for Norway, you can imagine what 40 cases are like. But this is only, and it's not only about that, when the Laban case is still pending and now before the the Committee of Ministers, because...
In Norway?
No, in Strasbourg. Because one thing is that Norway has been convicted in these cases, but they also have a duty or an obligation to comply with what we call Article 46 of the Convention, saying that the country who has been found guilty in violating these articles should, to the extent of possibility, repair the damages as good as they can. So a lot of people, there has been a misunderstanding, even from the official Norway, saying that a conviction in the European Court is only about paying him a sum of money and adapting new legislation for the future, and that's it. But that's not what it is about. This is about making repair for what the damage is done. And going back to Trude's case, that means that she and her child shall be reunited because of these violations. So, and since the reason why the European Court of Human Rights has communicated a record number of 40 cases, there are two reasons I think are the main reasons. First of all, of course, because the European Court consider this system to be dysfunctional. It must be improved. Second, of course, they are dissatisfied about the way Norway handles the repair process after being convicted. We saw that in the Jansen case and in the Lobben case, that they have not accepted the action plan that Norway has given the court. They have been, or the Minister of Committee, the Committee of Ministers. And there is another element to it which I see has now developed, and that is, of course, the element of discrimination. That they start to attack Norway by saying that Norway is violating the fundamental human rights to immigrants or foreign families residing in Norway. So at the moment, I think we have something like 16, 17, maybe as much as almost 20 of these cases are involving citizens from other countries. And keep in mind that in 5 of the 7 judgments already ruled upon, we have citizens from other countries. We have from Philippines, from Sweden, from Poland, indigenous groups, from the Romanian, the Roma people. So you have a lot. This is also raising a question about discrimination. And the interesting part about that is that in this one case involving a Somali woman, where Norway was convicted on just before Christmas last year, she won a full victory with regard to Article 8 of the Convention. The court stated that it was wrong of the Norwegian court not to facilitate reunification between the child and her. She was a young mother when she gave birth to that child. But the court didn't rule upon her second argument, saying that this is also a violation of Article 9, the respect for freedom of religion and the respect to freedom of belief. So she made a complaint about that, and luckily the court accepted to bring that case to the Grand Chamber. So there will be another Grand Chamber case against Norway, not this time about Article 8, because that's already given a ruling upon, which is final, but a ruling upon Article 9 of the Convention, saying that, and most likely, I think my personal opinion is about that, is that there will be a ruling against Norway finding a violation of Article 9 of the Convention. So that's going to be interesting to see if that's probably going to be a ruling that will come next year, I think.
But in general, you can correct me if I'm wrong, in order to actually take a case to the European Court, you have to go through the court system in Norway first. And once you have reached your limits there, then it's actually possible to go to the European Court, not earlier. Is that right?
Well, in general terms, that's the correct description. But more and more people are saying that the Norwegian judiciary is not efficient enough.
Yeah.
I mean...
Because what my point here is that there's a long time in between passing away. And then we're also talking about children that are separated from their parents, from their families, that are continuously being traumatized. I think this is a very difficult thing here that we're talking about.
But I'm glad you're bringing up that question, because before I came here to Austria, I just filed another complaint to the European Court saying that this is actually something new that the European Court has to look into, because it's obvious that the European Court has stated in all these 7 judgments that taking a child into public care is, even if it's right, a temporary measure that should be discontinued as soon as circumstances permit. And Norway doesn't care about that, so they continue to keep these children in the public care. And the legal system is taking so long. So if the parents are going to comply with the legal system saying that you have to exhaust the domestic remedies, it can take years before they can go to the European Court, right? So what we're actually trying to tell the European Court now is that this legal system is not functioning effectively. I mean, they cannot give an effective redress to the people who are affected or victims of this system. So that means that the court has to now consider if they are to let cases go through without going through the Norwegian system. I mean, and I think that's a possibility since they have already concluded that these cases are so-called repetitive cases, and you only go into the category of repetitive cases if there is something dysfunctional about a system. And now we have now the Committee of Ministers or the execution department has considered these cases, all of these cases, to be repetitive cases. And that is another signal that I think in the future some of these cases will be accepted without going through the Norwegian system.
Now we have seen some victory during the past year, or a little bit more than a year, where there were judgments against Norway. How is Norway going from there? What do you see? Is this bringing in general any changes to the Norwegian child welfare system, or do they continue business as usual? What's your observation?
Oh yeah, that's a multi-million question, because obviously after the Laban judgment last year, you cannot reach any higher in Europe than the Grand Chamber. Only one in like 50,000 cases end up in the Grand Chamber, and only the most important cases. So I was very confident when we had that victory that this is going to be it. This is going to be, Trude will have her son back. This is going to give tremendous changes to all of the other thousands of families who are struggling in the system. But I was wrong. Unfortunately, we have a Christian minister who has shown a tremendous arrogance, not only to the people of Norway, but also to the members of parliament, in a way that he has responded with not only with arrogance, but with definitely with a wrong misinterpretation of Article 46 of the Convention. He has with the agents of the government said to most of the people that a judgment from the European Court is only about paying a sum of money and to adapt or to adjust its legislation in the future, and that's it, which is obviously wrong. That's something that the Supreme Court has given us support in that now. But the repair process has been, in my opinion, ridiculous, and I think this is. And out of these 7 cases where the families have won against Norway, only one family has had the child back. So that means that 6 of the families are still struggling, even though they have the convictions in the pocket. So I'm extremely disappointed once again with that, and it's insane to think about that. I have. Even after the conviction in the European Court, I think I've addressed the execution department in the Council of Europe with at least 35 letters, emails since that judgment, trying to address that this is a structural and this is a very, very calculated way of doing things, that they are like obviously delaying the reunification process in order and hope that the parents will give up. So I'm extremely disappointed about how the Norwegian government, with the Prime Minister as the main responsible for this, has dealt with they haven't even apologized for the losses yet. But there are some hopes, especially now with the Supreme Court saying that when Norway has been found to violate the convention, Norway has an obligation not only to stop the ongoing violations, but also to take the necessary individual and general measures to so that the families can be put in a position as the violation never occurred. So that's a good way forward, I think. But obviously, it's still a long way to go.
We're talking also about families that are not Norwegians who have their children taken. Mm-hmm. We are aware of cases where actually American citizens are involved. You know the case of Amy Jacobson. You actually know her personally. She's an American citizen. Her child was taken in 2013. Now we're in 2020. Yeah. Last year in 2019, 3 other American children were taken from a family that had only temporarily moved to Norway because of a new job that the husband, the father of the children had there. They were not planning even to stay long in Norway, and now those children, they have been taken for more than a year now, being placed in 3 different foster homes all across Norway with no contact to each other, and the parents only see them like 3 times a year. What would you say, especially to the international or especially to the American community out there? How can they support their own American citizens so that these children would be reunited with their parents?
Yeah, I mean, if these families had the same support as what we saw in the Bonari case, I mean, they would have had their children back now. Unfortunately, it's I think they have been left down by the American communities. I mean, the American embassy and should have involved themselves a lot more in these cases than what they've done so far. But for some reasons, they are still struggling, and I can only encourage the American people to get involved in the same way like they did in the Bonari case, or maybe that's not going to be possible for that, because that case was really a strong, and that was a really unique case. But at the same time, I think it's extremely important to focus on these cases as well, because these cases obviously, along with a lot of other cases, of course, show that foreign families, regardless of country, even powerful United States, are being targeted by the Norwegian system. And of course, the European Court of Human Rights have noticed this already. That's why they communicate so many cases with families with foreign background. But the cases you're mentioning now with the American, they haven't reached the attention of the European Court yet, so maybe that will be necessary in order for them to get the children back. I hope not, but it seems to be these cases seems to be very difficult to solve, and I'm not very optimistic. Of course, I'm not optimistic about the outcome in Norwegian courts, because it has proven repeatedly that Norwegian courts are very loyal to the system. So, and even with the judgments from the European Court, it takes a very slow progress to reform the Norwegian courts. I mean, we see some changes, but still it's going way too slow.
Well, thank you so much, Marius, for taking your time to come again to Austria. And thank you also, you guys out there watching this. And I'd like to ask you to support us in raising awareness on these cases. Please share this video and use your voice that you have so that we can support these families, and especially the children that are so heavily traumatized and that are suffering. They want to come home, so let's support them. Thank you so much, and thanks for watching.